Your roadmap to the latest in auto. Welcome to Highway Herald. Buckle up, gearheads. North America's trade landscape just hit a major shift. In early 2025, the US slapped steep tariffs on Canadian imports, citing border security concerns. Canada fired back with retaliatory measures, igniting an economic standoff. But here's the twist. China has stepped in as a key player in Canada's energy exports. What does this mean for autos, oil, and trade? Let's break it down with 7 major developments shaping Canada's economic future. Number 7. The spark that ignited it all. US tariffs shake up North American trade. February 2025 marked a seismic shift in US-Canada trade relations. The Trump administration, aiming to pressure Canada on border security and fentanyl trafficking, imposed a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, with an additional 10% penalty on energy exports. For a nation heavily dependent on US trade, this was a devastating economic blow. The impact? Immediate turmoil. Canada's oil industry, already facing global competition, scrambled to diversify trade routes. In retaliation, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau countered with $30 billion in tariffs, hitting US bourbon, textiles, and home appliances, escalating this from a trade dispute to an economic war. Critics saw the tariffs as economic posturing rather than genuine security measures. Even after a 30-day diplomatic ceasefire, one thing was clear: the US-Canada trade relationship had changed forever. Number 6. The Asian pivot, Canada's new trade lifeline. With US trade restrictions tightening the noose on Canada's energy sector, the nation had to act fast and pivot eastward. The solution? A major expansion into Asian markets. In May 2024, Canada completed the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, increasing capacity to 890,000 barrels per day, a move that proved perfectly timed. Almost overnight, China, Japan, and South Korea became key alternative buyers, offering a much-needed escape from US trade constraints. China, the world's top crude oil importer, wasted no time securing multiple shipments of Canadian oil through refiner Rongsheng Petrochemical, signaling Beijing's drive to diversify away from US and Middle Eastern supplies. But here's the risk: swapping one trade dependency for another. Over-reliance on China exposes Canada to economic leverage tactics, potentially complicating relations with Western allies. For now, this pivot is essential for survival. Number 5. Trade war fallout, a wrecking ball for key industries. The US-Canada trade war has sent shockwaves beyond oil and energy, hitting automotive manufacturing the hardest. Ontario and Quebec, once key players in North America's auto industry, now face rising costs, supply chain disruptions, and production delays, making car manufacturing in Canada far more expensive. Investors in Canada's energy sector are also growing nervous, with concerns over trade instability, reliance on China, and fluctuating stock prices. The shift in trade dynamics comes as global energy markets move toward renewables, raising doubts about oil's long-term profitability. Adding to the challenge, infrastructure reconfiguration is now critical. With US refineries no longer the primary buyers, Canadian companies must rapidly adjust trade routes. With no resolution in sight, the economic impact of this trade war will last for years. Before we delve deeper, we'd appreciate it if you could subscribe to Highway Herald. Your support fuels our passion to create more content like this. Now let's explore number 4. Political backlash, Trudeau under fire. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is under pressure as his retaliatory tariffs against the US spark economic and political backlash. Initially seen as a bold defense of Canadian sovereignty, his approach is now facing criticism. An Angus Reid poll found that 57% of Canadians believe the trade war is hurting the economy, while 34% worry about rising prices. Critics argue Trudeau's strategy may fuel instability rather than protect economic interests. The biggest concern? Canada's growing ties with China. While some see it as necessary diversification, others warn of Beijing's history of economic manipulation. Meanwhile, opposition parties and business leaders demand a long-term trade strategy to avoid deepening uncertainty. With North American trade shifting dramatically, one thing is certain: the economic landscape will never be the same. Number 3. The sustainability paradox, Canada's environmental contradiction. Canada's climate leadership and its investment in fossil fuels present a glaring contradiction. The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion has boosted economic growth by increasing oil exports, but it has also raised concerns about emissions and sustainability. The Trudeau administration has tried to balance this with a carbon tax and emissions reduction policies, yet critics argue these measures fail to offset the surge in oil production. Adding complexity is China's role. As the world's largest carbon emitter, its growing reliance on Canadian crude undermines global climate goals. While trade diversification is crucial for Canada's economy, is it fueling emissions while claiming environmental leadership? With mounting pressure, policymakers must reconcile economic ambitions with sustainability, a challenge that will shape Canada's global reputation for years. Number 2. Washington's next move: U.S. strategic countermeasures. The U.S. isn't backing down as Canada pivots toward Asian markets. The Trump administration has launched a full-scale counteroffensive to curb Canada's growing trade ties with China. One key move? Restricting Canadian crude access to U.S. refineries, a tactic that could severely disrupt trade flows. Additionally, Washington is introducing tax penalties and environmental regulations to discourage American investments in Canadian energy. Beyond tariffs, the U.S. is using diplomatic and institutional pressure. American officials have lobbied the WTO and IMF, arguing that Canada's shift to China threatens North American trade stability. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence is closely monitoring Canada-China ties, fearing the transfer of sensitive energy technology. Caught in this geopolitical chess match, Canada must now strategically navigate U.S. scrutiny to secure its long-term economic future. Number 1. The path forward: shaping Canada's trade future. Canada stands at a critical crossroads in its economic strategy, requiring careful maneuvering to ensure stability, trade security, and diplomatic balance. A top priority: strengthening trade infrastructure. To truly diversify partnerships, Canada must invest in port expansions, energy transport networks, and regulatory reforms to streamline exports across multiple markets. At the same time, aligning with Asian markets must not alienate Western allies. Long-term agreements with Japan and South Korea could offset over-reliance on China while maintaining diplomatic goodwill with the US and Europe. Another key shift: energy diversification. With the world moving toward renewables, Canada must invest in clean energy to stay competitive. The question remains: will Canada become a global trade powerhouse or remain tethered to past dependencies? The decisions made today will define its future. Conclusion: what lies ahead for Canada's trade strategy? Canada's economic future is at a pivotal moment. Moving away from decades of U.S. trade reliance is a bold step, but it comes with significant risks and uncertainties. Shifting priorities toward China and other Asian partners presents new opportunities for growth, yet also exposes Canada to geopolitical tensions and economic vulnerabilities. While diversification provides short-term stability, the long-term challenge is balancing new trade partnerships without straining relationships with Western allies. Can Canada secure its place as a global trade powerhouse? Or will increased reliance on China backfire and create long-term instability? The future depends on Canada's ability to adapt, innovate, and strategically manage trade relations. If done right, the country could thrive as an independent global player. If miscalculated, it may face economic turbulence and diplomatic challenges. What's your take? Will Canada rise as a trade leader or face unexpected hurdles? Drop your thoughts below. And if you want to stay ahead of all the latest vehicle and economic updates, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a breakdown like this. Thanks for tuning into Highway Herald. See you next time.